okay in the back? I'm not sure about whether I should talk up louder or if this is okay. Well, I just want to welcome everyone. I'm John Kopchik. I'm the director of the County Department of Conservation and Development, but more importantly, my boss, Supervisor Diane Burgas, Supervisor for District 3 of Contra Costa County, is here. She's the main reason this is happening at all, and I want to invite Supervisor Burgas up to the podium to say welcome.
My microphone trick I get to do every time. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. You know, we originally had this planned a couple weeks ago, but it was really important that we get as many people out here today because we want every voice, every idea to be brought to the table so that we can, hear you. And so we rescheduled it and we did some more outreach, and we will continue to try to improve on that outreach. So a little later on, we'll kind of point out some folks that you can contact so that you can increase this participation. While running for this office, one of the first things that people brought up was our Ag Corps and how important it is and how we need to make sure that everybody has a chance to be as successful doing what they do as a farmer as we can. And so that's why we're here. What we're going to do is I'm going to have everybody kind of stand up and say who they are and what you do, that way everybody can kind of know who's in the room. And then John Kopchik will take over.
Well, again, welcome everyone. This has been a long time coming, and I don't want to steal the thunder from my colleagues who are going to go through a PowerPoint presentation, but in general, the focus for today is to look at what Igor was talking about, which is what kind of policy reforms can the county consider from a land use perspective, general plan and zoning, that will make agriculture both more sustainable and more economically vital. I think a focus in the past, and I think at Carolyn's event a couple years ago, I think I said this, which is that I've been the director for 4 years, but I've been at the county for 23 years. Our focus has been post-Measure C, which was a growth control measure, set the urban limit line in 1990. We'll give you the full history. That we looked at the urban limit line and looking at mass conversion of agricultural land to urban uses. And that, the idea was to have orderly growth, to try and have that happen where planned, where infrastructure was in place. And so a focus of county policy was at that conversion. And I think that those policies are in place. They've been reapproved by the voters through Measure J and through Measure L. But the question is okay, the agricultural lands are not as able for mass conversion. They still can develop individual house on an individual parcel, but are those agricultural lands thriving? Certainly to the extent they can. And so I was, starting as a director, one of my first jobs was to come to this room twice and listen to, I think, a smaller room full of farmers, but I think it was even more farmers and less organizations in this group, and there were a litany of concerns about what, the ways in which things weren't as easy for farmers to thrive as they could be. And some of it was outside of our department's mandate. Some of it was, how can we have more CHP patrol to make sure people are speeding? People are stealing my crops. But a lot of it fell on our doorstep, and so we really were listening. And so for those of you who were in this room, Ron, and a few others, this is really a result of that. And the supervisors, as Jen will mention, have authorized a substantial sum of funds for us to look at our agricultural policy review, which is an important step by our board. So without our board's leadership, I don't think any of this would be happening. And so what we're going to talk to you about today is that this is the first step in a public outreach process. We're going to have a series of other meetings. Today's a first step. We really want to focus today on vision. And so the agenda for today is we have some background slides that we're going to go through. If you're wondering what the camera is, the county does have its own TV channel, this Contra Costa Television. This is being recorded. We will make it available online, but also we'll see if we can't get it on CCTV's broadcast. And we're through this process generating a mailing list, and we'll continue to use the website we've started for this ag policy review to make all the documents available, and we'll notify you of when this gets aired, if it does get aired on CCTV. So, I should mention, if anybody needs to use the restrooms, go out that door. There's some restrooms out that way. We have some background. We don't want to linger too much on background, but we want to provide some context. And then, our thought was, if we're going to talk about vision, we need some inspiration. We need to get the juices flowing. And so we talked to a number of you in the room to get ideas on who might be an ambassador from another county. And we're very pleased to have Stephanie Cormier here from Yolo County. And I'm going to kind of interview her, because she thought that'd be a more efficient way to kind of like get to the gist of how YOLO's different than Contra Costa and how it's the same. And they went through some ag policy review, and we have some lessons we can learn from them. And so we'll do that. We'll have questions after the presentation, questions for Stephanie, and then we really want to get into the meat, and we're going to do like 4 focus groups. They're going to be the same, so it doesn't matter which one you go to, although I'll stress now and I'll stress again, go to a table that has people you don't know. If everybody knows everybody goes to the same one, it's not nearly as interesting, so try and mix it up. We're going to go through a series of questions with you and so each group will have a facilitator from the Department of Conservation and Development. I'll do one, Jennifer will do one, will do one, and Aruna will do one. It's a model we've used in some other community planning things, and it's pretty effective. And the idea is to get in a small group and really try and get your input on things that will help us define a vision. Because if we're going to guide this ag policy reform, we want to know, is the vision still what our department thought it was in 1995, which is, we need to keep all hands off agriculture so that it can thrive and make food and fiber for people, period. And we don't want any ag tourism, really. Or we've been changing in that way and allowing more ag tourism. Should we keep going in that direction? So that's the kind of, or what other things can we do to basically keep agriculture sustainable but also have it be more economically vital? We really want a vision. Lots of areas have something they're known for, and we want to see if that is something that Contra Costa County, what are we known for? We're known for the farm trail and the U-pick that was mentioned. But what else are we known for? So that's the focus today. There'll be 5 other meetings. We'll look at the schedule a little bit later on. So that's the overview of the agenda. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jennifer Cruz, who's really going to be the point person. So if you have any questions as this process goes forward, you need an email address, Jennifer Cruz is that point person, and she's going to be managing this effort for us, and she's going to kick off the background presentation.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to go over, excuse me, I'm going to go over the background on how the Department of Conservation and Development received direction from the Board of Supervisors. Back in December 2016, the board approval authorized the Department of Conservation and Development in consultation with the Contra Costa County Agricultural Advisory Task Force and local agricultural stakeholders to review existing land use regulations, identify specific actions the county could take to further promote and incentivize agricultural sustainability and economic vitality. More recently, in February of 2014, the board authorized DCD to convene a series of public meetings and with people and parties interested in agricultural sustainability and economic vitality in Contra Costa in lieu of the Contra Costa Ag Task Force, since it's currently dormant. And again, it's to review existing land use regulations, provide input on potential modification to these policies. Now will go over the history of the existing land use regulation.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. And this PowerPoint will be online, and so I'm not going to read the slides. I don't think anyone likes that. So I'm just going to quickly go over them. Anything you want to see again, we'll provide this online. So going back to 1947, we've had zoning. We beat Germany and Japan. We said, oh, what should we do next? Let's write a zoning ordinance, right? So the original zoning was adopted in 47. It included agricultural zones, and those continue to this day, though, in one form or another, some of the regulations have changed. In 1978, there was a East County specific plan, East County general plan, and that's the first time that this Ag Core designation shows up in policy. That also continues on to this day in the current general plan. So in 1990, the county voters approved Measure C, the urban limit line, the 6535 land preservation plan, and those two are in the general plan. This is where we first get the 40-acre minimum lot size that we have here in the Ag Core. And as it says, everything outside the urban limit line is limited to non-urban uses. So that's agriculture, open space, parks, wetlands, things of that nature. In 1991, the board adopted the general plan. And so that general plan, we're actually just beginning the process of updating the general plan. It's never been comprehensively updated. We're just starting the process of doing that. And so the general plan incorporates the 6535 standard. I should go back and say what that is. It means 35% of the county, all the land in the county, can be developed with urban uses, and 65% has to remain non-urban. So the urban limit line, ag policies, those are all in the current general plan.
Will, can you go back on the 40-acre minimum?
Sure.
Measure C required 40 acre.
Right. So just elaborate on that. Yeah, so that's in Measure C, which is approved by the voters. So the 40-acre minimum lot size in the Ag Core is not something that came out of the county planning department. It's something that came out of the voters of Contra Costa County. So we have other smaller ag parcel sizes, as small as 5 acres. We have zones that allow 5 acres, 10 acres, 5, 10, 20, 40, and 80 are our zoning allowances, the parcel sizes. But in the agricultural core area, pretty much all the land out here in Knightson, outside Brentwood, Discovery Bay, Byron, it's 40 acres. There we go. Okay, then, so as John mentioned, there was the thinking that, okay, we have to preserve all this ag land. Well, then the thinking started to become, well, okay, it's been preserved, now what are we going to do with all this ag land? And so in 2004, this is when the general plan was amended by the board, general plan and the zoning, to provide explicitly for wineries, olive mills, and other value-added processing. Now, we've also interpreted that to mean other similar types of uses, so distilleries, for example, which, there's nothing materially different between a winery, brewery, and distillery. And so we've also approved some of those sorts of land uses under this amendment from 2004. In fact, I think it was just last year, a distillery was approved out in the Tassajara area. I spoke with some gentlemen a couple months ago who were thinking of doing one outside Byron. In 2006, the voters of the county approved Measure L. So Measure C was going to expire in 2010. The urban limit line was going to expire. The 6535 plan was going to expire. Well, 4 years before it expired, it was approved and extended to 2026. So, presumably that will come to the ballot again in the next handful of years. Probably going to be extended again because at this point it's been interwoven into other things like transportation planning and transportation funding in this county. And then in 2007, the board amended the zoning and the general plan again, and this has to do with farm stands and farmers markets. And so this put in some standards, new regulations for farm stands up to 1,500 square feet, farm markets up to 3,500 square feet, and expanded the range of products that could be sold in these. The zoning was pretty tight on that before. This kind of actually loosened the regulations some. And so in 2015, a report was issued. The county received a grant from the the Delta Protection Commission to do for some reporting on agriculture in Contra Costa County. A gentleman named Lon Hadamia was hired to do that report. Lon is a lecturer at UC Davis. He also worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Long resume. He's also a farmer. So he was hired to do this, and I'm distilling about 100 pages down into 2 slides here, but the opportunities that he identified are the demand for locally grown, source-identified, healthy, and sustainable food is growing. Demand for organic products is growing. Value-added processing can be further developed across the county, and ag tourism can be expanded. Yes.
Did this gentleman talk with the locals here about what would be good for Contra Costa County, or was he just looking at from the state?
He did do interviews. I would have to go back and take a look at the reports again, which talk about the outreach and what he did. But yes, he did. There was a on-the-ground portion of his research.
And could the county website maybe have a link to that?
Absolutely, we can link those as well to the website. And so, recommendations, the report, there were more recommendations than what I'm going to put here, but these are basically what were under the purview of our department, is what I included. But reduce the barriers to development of necessary ag infrastructure, support ag tourism through zoning changes, infrastructure improvements, public outreach, create a farm budsman position as a liaison between the county and the agricultural community, and adopt additional policies to preserve ag lands and fund agricultural conservation easements. As I said, there's a lot more to the reports than this, but these were the highlights. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer.
Right, so what we have here is the county's, this is a county-wide map of general plan designations throughout the county, and we have, and I don't know if you could see it back there, but we have different shades here with we have the ag lands, and let's see if this works. Okay, so these are the ag lands designation here. Then we have the ag core, and actually, let me take a step back. Ag lands have a minimum parcel size requirement of 5 acres. The ag core areas here, and that has a minimum parcel size of 40 acres. Then we have the Delta recreation designation out here, and then also the parks and recreation, and then the watershed land use designation in these areas, right here. Here is the county-wide agricultural land use zoning designations. And with these zoning designations, we have the A2 areas, general agriculture, and they're not quite as obvious, but they're lighter green. They also have a 5-acre minimum. The A3 zoning, like these green areas here, it's heavy agriculture, and that has a 10-acre minimum. The A4 agricultural preserve, that has a 10-acre prime land use minimum size, and it's 40 acres non-prime land use. Then the A40 and A80, A20 and A40 and A80 are the exclusive agricultural areas, which are the darker green areas here. And the A20 has a 20-acre minimum lot size, as well as the A40 has a 40-acre, and the A80 has an 80-acre minimum lot size. So this, there was a report in 2016 prepared by the Department of the Contra Costa County, or Contra Costa County Department of Agriculture, and it was a agricultural crop report. And in this report, it indicated that there was a total gross value of agricultural crops in Contra Costa County valued at $128 million. The report also identified the leading crops in the county, with the top 3 being cattle and calves at $23.3 million, then sweet corn at $23.3 million, and tomatoes at $20 million. Then they had grapes, miscellaneous vegetable crops, field corn, etc. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to John.
This will be the last presenter change in our musical chairs of presenters. But what we wanted to, and again, wanted to show that this is the "we were listening" slide. This is the list of complaints that, this is a shorter list of the list of complaints and concerns and suggestions and ideas that we've heard in a couple of town hall meetings that Supervisor Pifo convened when she was here. Supervisor Burgas has also met with agricultural stakeholders, and we were busy taking notes. And so this is kind of a summary list of suggestions and ideas. I'll just cover it very briefly. I think we could go on and on. The point today is really vision, but we just wanted to acknowledge that there's been a lot of ideas and suggestions and concerns expressed so far. So agritourism comes up over and over. And so there are various ideas have been suggested, allow B&Bs, allow distilleries, we already do, allow farm-to-table farm restaurants, allow, try and develop a farm trail, a more developed farm trail than we already have. Beef up the U-pick and support marketing for the U-pick, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of other ideas came up about, well, if wastewater is a limiting concern, which it is because there aren't urban services to these areas, what can rural farmers do to try and treat wastewater in a way that doesn't harm the aquifer? What kind of vision can we take? Can we draw inspiration from other regions? For instance, Livermore, Pleasanton's often brought up. How come they have so many more wineries than we do? Let's look at other areas for inspiration. And then a whole host of concerns raised, including a couple that I'll mention because I recognize some faces from recent appeal hearings we've had, but especially out in this area, there have been a whole lot of events being hosted, except for the one on Father's Day. None of them had permits, and some of these are very large, like rodeos with 1,000 people at them, without permits, without anything. And so we finally had one on Father's Day, just about a mile that way, that we limited to 300 people and had to turn away about 400 people. And we had staff there to try and keep an eye on that. But I think the neighborhood, the community is overwhelmed with traffic and noise and concern with that. So that's an issue that's definitely surfaced recently. And I know from some meetings with the Tasahara community that another big issue that folks have raised is code enforcement, that for a lot of these areas, they're both, important for cattle raising, but also nice communities where it's not helpful to have dumping grounds as your next door neighbor, or to have professional bicycle tracks installed without permits, these kinds of things. These are the concerns that we've heard. And so there's been a lot of those. We're happy to continue to hear all of those kinds of concerns. We're really looking to, the purpose of today and the future meetings is to take those concerns and turn them into actions. What does writing something on a piece of paper really going to do? Well, it matters. The regulations that we hope to get your input on, can make a difference in some of these things. Some of it will require resources as well, but what we're really trying to do today is to flip the page from concerns to developing a vision, and then at the future meetings to flip the page from vision into practical regulations that we can implement. So just a review of the schedule. I've got to get used to this, the clicker. So we envision a 6 public meeting process that we want to conduct this summer and fall. So this is the first meeting. We're going to have 4 of the 6 meetings in East County, but the second meeting, I can't remember if the second meeting's in South County. Second meeting's in Central County. We've already set a date, July 19th. Will be in Martinez. The idea is when you looked at that map that Jennifer showed, the vast majority of agricultural lands are in eastern Contra Costa County, but there's also a great deal on both sides of 680, particularly down in the San Ramon Valley, and there's also some in the Briones Valley area, and so we're going to have 2 of the meetings kind of more remote, and then meetings 3, 4, 5, and 6 back in East Contra Costa County, perhaps in this room. We'll have to figure out exactly where they are. So we will keep the schedule updated on our website. Use the mailing list. Please, if you haven't, before you leave, make sure you sign in on that list to make sure your name is on there. We welcome everyone to attend. Again, this is envisioned partly as a, showing the part 2 of the schedule. sixth meeting is to be determined. We also listed on there kind of the theme of each of them, so it's kind of visioning this meeting and starting to turn the page to other things in the future meetings to develop a recommendation to bring to the board in December. And that recommendation would be, this is what we've heard from the community. We will also, just candidly, we'll present staff recommendations as well, but we will present the community as best we can. How do you capture the consensus from the community? To the extent we can capture consensus, that would be great. We had considered and discussed with Supervisor Burgas the idea of creating a formal kind of committee to guide this, but we're worried that that process would take so long to set up that it might be better to just have open meetings and to do the best we can. I would be surprised if meeting number 4 has as many people as this. That would be great if it did. But usually the people most committed show up. So if you really want to influence, I suggest you keep coming, because the idea is that we want to try and have kind of trade-off discussions in these meetings. So, we have, maybe people have opposing views, and as the meetings progress, we're hoping to see if we can find compromises among the community. There may be some uses that have growth-inducing impacts, but can those be mitigated in some way? With parcel sizes or buffers or those kinds of things? And can we get some sort of consensus between the farming community and the business community and the conservation community and the land trust community that will make it easier for policymakers to see what the choices are? And so that's really what we're trying to launch today, with the idea that once we get to the board in December with kind of the list of recommendations, the board would give us direction like, yes, do this one and this one, but not that one, change this one, give us and then they'd give us our marching orders to actually write with the attorneys the ordinance changes and any general plan amendments. And then we would attempt to bring those back to the board in the summer of 2019. Which I know sounds like a really long time, but that's the compressed schedule, just so you know. That is really fast for us. I do want to mention also that, wow, I'm really not used to the animation, that as Will discussed already, that simultaneous with this, we were just interviewing this week consultants to do the comprehensive general plan update. We haven't done a comprehensive general plan update since the general plan was really first written in 1990. So this is the first time in 28 years. That's going to be a 2-year effort ending at the end of 2020. And we're going to be looking at all these issues again. And I really view, a simple thing for us to say would be, let's do all these meetings and we'll capture the community's input and we'll make the changes in the 2020 general plan and any zoning reform that comes out of that. But that schedule doesn't sit well with me personally. I think that we should act more quickly, so that's why we're proposing to basically cut in line and have the recommendations that come out of this process lead to some immediate, again, next year, changes to the general plan and or zoning. But the general plan redo and the big environmental document that's going to come with it and the budget that comes with that presents another opportunity to think bigger, think more fine-tuned. There won't be a lot of time to test drive the 2019 changes, but the idea is that we'll get another bite of the apple to further reform our policies in 2020 as kind of an omnibus with everything else. So, I think, as I mentioned before, when I was hired at the county in 1995, I think this is the kind of the vision of agriculture, is big open fields with Mount Diablo in the background. And there's a lot of that. But is that vision enough? Other jurisdictions have, kind of their niche. And not that you necessarily have to have a one-size-fits-all niche like Gilroy and garlic, or what are the other examples? Wine in Sonoma, or Livermore Valley wine. A lot of them are wine. But what can be our niche? We, again, we're sort of focused on, if you look at our zoning code, it's pretty pro building processing facilities. If you want to build a cannery or a slaughterhouse or something really big like that, the zoning code is pretty permissive in that way, and to just having large lot agriculture. But we don't have a lot of those. There doesn't seem to be a lot of demand for those. So do we want to look at, what the harvest time has already been, I don't know how long, Mr. Hagan, harvest time has had this map out, but 20 years probably? So, that, did you say 42 or 20? 22 years. Wow. So, and if you were here in East Contra Costa County, Memorial Day weekend, you probably could see that the map was being put to good use. There were a whole lot of people out enjoying the U-pick to pick cherries. But, do we want to have our policies continue to reflect this kind of use more and more? And how do we reflect the reality that in eastern Contra Costa County, though we have a 40-acre minimum parcel size, that in reality, the average parcel size in the agricultural core is about 10 acres. So if this is a map of parcel size and the lighter shades are smaller, so the very lightest color are less than 5-acre parcels, and it's not until you get to the very darkest rust color that it's bigger than 20 acres. So you can see that the extent to which this is already parcelized. Under our code, each parcel, if they can pass the perk test and things, has a legal right to pursue building a house on it. So this is, how do you reconcile that this is in some ways a very rural but residential community, in addition to one that grows and wants to put tractors on there and needs to spray? I mean, how do you reconcile some of that? But does this parcel distribution really fit the vision of large lot agriculture that I think, has been guiding county policy for a while? Looking at other places for an example. So I know that Supervisor Burgas's office and Jennifer took a field trip to, do I call it V-Situi? I don't know what the V stands for, but, as an example of a kind of an ag commercial activity, a winery that has a restaurant function. Or people are often familiar with Mancos Corner in Solano County, which, in these cases, when you look at an aerial photo of that, there's kind of like a commercial hub at that corner with a bunch of interesting businesses, but then around it is sort of large lot agriculture. So it's a little density of commercial agriculture in a sea of agriculture. And other examples like this is on Route 12, right, Will? So this is in Sacramento. 12 and 160, the Delta Farmers Market. Something that could actually be permitted under our code now, but certainly a well-known spot that folks around. And what can we learn from a neighbor to the northeast, Yolo County, where they have a mix, and we'll hear from Stephanie in a moment about what, they have valley floor, very large, kind of Central Valley agriculture, but they also have the Capay Valley that has a little bit more like our eastern Contra Costa County. So that's what, the idea of this presentation was really to prime the pump, give you a little bit of background, and hope that we can encourage you to think vision for the next part of this. The next chapter will be to talk about vision with Stephanie, but I want to pause and see if anybody has any questions about the background before we launch into interviewing Stephanie. Yes.
Hi. Was there ever a decision not to allow variances for ag core regulations?
Explain more what you mean.
Well, so I'm applying for a monument sign for Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And the sign looks identical to all the signs around the entire area. But I'm not permitted to light the sign, even though 50 feet away, the signs are all lighted. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to apply for a variance to permit lighting of that sign. And I was told there are no variances under the farm stand ordinance in my land use permit. So I didn't know if that was a conscious decision or if that was something that people just forgot.
I wasn't active in that one, so I can't say, but I mean, basically, if our code doesn't include, we're very familiar with variances, so if it isn't in there, it was probably intentional. Any other questions? Okay, that's good, because I actually think that we don't want to bore you with all the history. We really want to get into vision. And what I'll do now is invite Stephanie to come up to the table. Hopefully you guys can see her when she's there. So Stephanie, I'm going to stand and you're going to sit. I hope that's okay. And this was the format that made Stephanie the happiest. We had to sort of talk her into this because she's really busy developing cannabis policy. Oh, which, by the way, I should mention, it's been eating up my life for the last year and Supervisor Burgas's life for the last year. But next Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors is considering an ordinance that would change our zoning regulations from the current prohibition on cannabis, commercial cannabis uses, to allow kind of a test program. I don't know if test program is the right explanation of it, but we would allow up to 10 commercial cannabis operations, indoor or outdoor, in zoning districts that are agriculture and industrial, as well as up to 4 stores, and then manufacturing businesses and a whole bunch of other things. We didn't want, every time I bring up cannabis in any meeting, it tends to like blow the whole meeting away, and so I tried to just slip that in because I felt I had to mention it, but I'm not sure that, if you want to, in the breakout group, suggest cannabis as the vision for the future of Contra Costa County agriculture, by all means suggest that, but we don't mean to presume. But if you're interested, we have a whole webpage on our cannabis policy on, and next Tuesday is the important day. I will mention also that those regulations would only take effect if the voters approve a tax measure that will be on the July 10th Board of Supervisors agenda, that would, to put a ballot measure on the ballot for November. If that tax measure is passed, then the new regulations would take effect. If the tax measure is not passed, then the prohibition stays in effect. That's what's proposed. Anyway, sorry to sideswipe you with cannabis, because I know you've been busy with cannabis as well.
He
but
told me we wouldn't talk about
I
cannabis.
promised.
I thought I was on break.
Yeah. We're really pleased to have Stephanie Cormier here. She has worked for Yolo County for about a decade, but if maybe you could explain your background and explain, you've got this interesting title that probably only 3 people in the state have, which is Farms Buds Person, and your journey from planning to the ag department, and just a little bit about you.
Sure. So I came to Yolo County in 2006, and I was hired at what was called Planning and Public Works, which is our community development department, as an associate planner in the midst of a very comprehensive general plan update, which we can get into more, kind of like what you're going through now. And then you went on to become the senior planner there. So I've been with the county 12 years, and very recently we do have what we call a cannabis licensing program. It's an interim ordinance that allows people to cultivate commercially, and they lost their program manager for the code enforcement program and transferred me over with a nice lure of a promotion to principal planner. And so right now I currently work under the Department of Agriculture with the Agricultural Commissioner, who oversees the code enforcement program for cannabis. And because we have a position that was created in our comprehensive general plan update in 2009 to have a farm budsman. And what that is in Yolo County is really a kind of a permit coordinator liaison. So, and I know we're going to touch upon that. So they also gave me that title. I spend most of my time on cannabis, but I do have my favorite part, which is I'm the ag planner now, and I can get into that more too. And I am the farm budsman, and really I'm just the liaison for people interested in developing an agricultural industry, and maybe they're not really familiar with the set of regulations and processes that are required for even just getting a permit, whether that's a building permit or a land use entitlement, like a use permit or some other zoning.
So maybe you could introduce folks to Yolo County, like where it is, how important is ag to Yolo County? What kind of ag do you have? How is it different? Those kinds of things.
So Yolo County is bordered on the east by the Sacramento River all the way up to the top of, hits Colusa County up there, and you head to the west and you're into the Blue Ridge Mountains or the coastal range up there, bordering Lake, and then Napa County's on the western side, all the way down to, really we go down to the Solano County side along the corridor 80 there. We got the 5 corridor cutting through the middle of Yolo County, and we actually dip down into the delta, into the Clarksburg area. So we do have that unique area of Clarksburg, and then the Cape Valley, which is in the very northwestern corridor, so 2 very different communities, if you will, and then everything in between. So Yolo County is primarily ag. We're about nearly 90% of our lands are designated for agricultural use. Some of those lands are also designated for public open space with, BLM lands or other public lands. but most of our land is really wrapped up for agricultural or related uses. Our 4 cities are Davis and Woodland, which are our bigger cities, and West Sacramento, which is growing, and a very small city of Winters. Winters shares Solano County and Yolo County, as does southern Davis. So the crops vary. So the landscape really is primarily, I would say, just large irrigated lands, and you're seeing a lot of crop conversions. We have a lot of tree crops now. Almonds have really risen up in the past where, our number one crop is still processing tomatoes, and so we still have vast regions of large, especially in our, I would say, our western area, the Winters area, and we're primarily prime farmland. We're class 1 and 2 soils. And so we have a lot of the irrigated crop rotations. And then we also have what we call our extensive areas, where we have a lot of dry land farming or rangeland. So we do have a lot of cattle as well. That's one of our top 10 commodities. We have a lot of seed production, sunflower seeds, others, and we do have a lot of wine grape production. That's one of our biggest market values there. Processing tomatoes, almonds, and wine grapes are probably our biggest producers, as is our organic production, which really spans throughout the county, but you see a lot of our, what we call our more diversified, smaller parcel sizes in the Capay Valley, where you have a lot of organic farming, the truck farms we've talked about, kind of the market farming, and then we have, I don't know, I'm kind of getting lost here, but we have a range of parcel sizes.
And the Capay, I was looking at an aerial photo of Capay Valley. It looks, the parcel sizes aren't as small as in the map in Contra Costa County, but it's definitely
Yeah.
more in that
Right.
realm than your central.
Yeah, so the Capay Valley kind of comes down and follows Cache Creek. And so you do have a valley floor where you have your intensive farming. And then as you expand out on either side, either to the Blue Ridge Mountains or the Capay Hills, then you get into your rangeland farming or just hills for hunting, I guess. I mean, they're really not very accessible, so you have but we do have a lot of unique and diversified areas and a need, much like I'm hearing, I can take a page out of your book right now and slap it in to Yolo County's history. And we're still trying to accommodate our diversified communities. And how do you create policy and regulations that are going to help benefit, not just preserve ag, but really diversify and enhance ag.
Well, let's touch on a baseline of, so what are your ag policies generally? So like what kind of minimum parcel sizes do you have? And maybe touch on, I was interested about your ag commercial zoning district.
Okay. So we have 2 primary ag zones, and our ag, well, let me start with our policies. Our number 1 policy always has been preservation of ag land, and so that is Yolo County's primary policy. It spans through all the elements of the general plan, the land use element. We have our own agricultural element. It's an optional element in the general plan, but it is an equally weighted element, as well as our conservation policies. They all tie back to the preservation of ag land. Our primary zones are ag intensive and ag extensive. So where you see all the prime farmland on flat valley floors and sometimes the larger, big commercial production, we have minimum parcel sizes of 80 acres if you're in cultivated and irrigated lands, and down to 40 if you're in permanent crops. If you're not in irrigated lands, then you're up to 160. Our minimum parcel sizes really don't come into effect unless you want to subdivide your land. We also prohibit the subdivision of ag land, so we have a lot of competing interests. So if you want to just divide your ag land and it's not for an ag purpose, then we can't make a finding and it would actually be prohibited in Yolo County. So the minimum parcel sizes really come in if there's a ag reason to subdivide a piece of ag land. So in our rangeland areas, the minimum parcel sizes are 360 acres. And that's really because when we did our comprehensive general plan update, and which we adopted in 2009, we looked at, okay, what is the viability here? So can you sustain a big ag operation on 40 acres if you're in irrigated and rotating crops? And we consulted with our agricultural commissioner, as well as, we're right next to UC Davis, so we always have that opportunity. And that's where we came up with these minimum parcel sizes that are really applied when we divide ag land. I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question. And then the two other ag zones we have are our ag industrial and ag commercial zones. And those were added with our general plan update because our general plan, which was updated in 2009, really wanted to encourage, we want to preserve ag land, but how do we sustain? How do we sustain the farmer? How do we keep farming families alive? And we wanted to better allow for ag industrial and ag commercial support industries. So we do have those two zones. They're only applied if it's an existing use, or you can apply for a rezone if you want to do a use that would be a better fit for the ag commercial or ag industrial zone. So our ag industrial zone requires a minimum of 5 acres, but it doesn't have a maximum. Our ag commercial zone, you can only go up to 20 acres. So if you wanted to apply for a rezone on a big agricultural parcel to do something that was specific to our ag commercial uses, then your remainder would have to comply with the zone that you're cutting it out. I don't know if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So I'm guessing the ag commercial would be stores and those kinds of things
Yeah.
and restaurants?
Yeah.
And the ag industrial is processing facilities?
Exactly.
And so you applied them retroactively to things that were already there. Have there
right.
been any new rezonings to allow new ones since in the last 10 years?
No, not, I'm trying to think. We've had some rezones to ag industrial.
Okay.
So the other thing to note is when, so we went through this comprehensive general plan update in 2009, but then we had to catch up because now our development codes, our zoning, was way out of balance, way out of sync. It wasn't consistent.
Can I do just a planning 101 to explain? So
Yeah.
in land use law, every local jurisdiction has to have a general plan, which is kind of like the U.S. Constitution, and then you have to have a zoning, which is meant to be more specific. The general plan, I was going to say trumps, but the general plan trumps the zoning. So when they're in conflict, the general plan wins. And so the zoning is meant to be more detailed. So that's why Stephanie's saying, so like for our general plan update, we're going to change the general plan, and then we have to make the zoning the more specific interpretation. We try to make it consistent. Sorry,
Yeah,
go back to your answer.
Yeah, so, and sorry, I forgot where we left off.
You were talking about how the general plan update led to a rezone.
Oh, right, and
zoning.
so what we tried to do with that general plan update is acknowledge that we had all these, and in the case of our ag commercial, we had these little stores, like the ones that you saw on the slides, that were just surrounded by ag land, and they're not really ag uses, but they're serving the ag community. So a lot of the uses that would be allowed maybe more by right in our ag commercial zones really have to be able to serve. You have to show that this is serving the ag community. It's supporting the ag community. It's not a standalone, has nothing to do with ag. But that being said, our AN and our AX, our ag intensive and our ag extensive zones, also allow most of the uses that could also be allowed in ag commercial, ag industrial. It just might be a higher entitlement, like you might have to get a use permit.
So the kinds of issues that came up when we were talking before, that came up through your general plan update, I mean, some of it had to do with agritourism, and can you describe the ways in which either in your zoning review or in your general plan review that agritourism came up? And I know you've been dealing with event centers, and could you discuss on agritourism uses and how, the county views that, whether it's in it, what are the trade-offs for that and what some of the experience has been?
Well, certainly our 2009 general plan update, because like yours, our general plan had not been updated since 1983, except to add the agricultural element in 2002. So one of the emerging industries really was tourism in the agricultural areas. And so our general plan was updated to include policies that would allow for farmers or ranchers or the ag industry to invite people to the property, to enhance, value-added crops. So instead of just growing crops, now how can we make this more? How can we keep our generations on the farm? And we had been slapping on our zoning code in the meantime. Oh, for bed and breakfast, it's a use permit. So we made a use permit for every agritourism use. And what we did when we reformed our ag zones, or actually we did a comprehensive zoning code update, is we tried to create thresholds. How can we, the regulatory process is very cumbersome. If you want to come in and get a permit, and it's a use permit, it's very lengthy, it's discretionary, it's sometimes controversial. So we wanted to allow operating farmers the opportunity to enhance their industry without too much regulatory process. But that became very difficult and I'm just going to be honest, when we went to write our zoning code and we met with groups, our ag groups, we had to find that balance. How do we not impact the ag areas, but allow people to enhance their industries? And we came up with thresholds. So I'm going to give you an example. We already knew there were existing events being held on people's properties, and we didn't want to have to go now create code enforcement issues with developing code that suddenly would put everybody into an illegal use, if you will. So we said, look, if you're an operating farm and you've got 40 acres, because remember our parcel sizes are a lot bigger, then you can have up to 8 events per year by right, and we'll just make sure your barns are permitted and that you have appropriate parking, you get off the county road, and that you have the facilities you need. And so we tried to create those kind of thresholds that wouldn't necessarily trigger so much permitting. The other side of that are the complaints. So when we allow these uses with use permits, we get new people coming in thinking, oh, this is an opportunity, and perhaps they hadn't been farming the area or they were new to the area and really weren't used to whatever community they were coming into and the ag-intensive uses there. And the proposal would be controversial because of the compatibility between the existing ag operations and the thought of bringing a lot of what we call urban uses to a remote area where there weren't services. And our roads are not in any good shape at all. I love coming outside of Yellow County and not being on a bumpy road. So I think those are some of the obstacles we hit, is that the services that you need to provide an ongoing agritourism industry is very crucial. And maybe the location, being in proximity to where you do have your municipal services much closer. I know I'm sort of getting off track
No,
here.
that's all good information. I want to leave some time for folks to ask questions of you as well, but maybe the Farms Buds person's an idea that's come up around here, and what was interesting to me when talking to you earlier was the way in which that job evolved,
Yeah.
and that your predecessor, it sounded like, was more of a marketing, economic development promoter, and that your role has shifted.
Yeah.
So maybe you could
Yeah,
touch
so
on that.
when we first, well, in the general plan, it's really called out as a permit coordinator. But then we were able to, in conjunction with Solano County, we were able to hire a farm budsman that served both counties, and that position was funded. And she was able to really reach out, and the main goal was to get the smaller farmer who really hadn't ever built an almond huller or whatever it is. In Yolo County's case, I think it was really to the more ag support services and a little bit less on the agritourism side of things, since those kinds of things were already kind of happening naturally with farmers and farm dinners. So her role was to kind of, educate or seek funding opportunities and help kind of bring people into the know. And I was the de facto liaison for the farm budsman at the time because I understood the permitting process. And I know that Ms. Leff over here probably has more experience because she was coordinating with our farm budsman at the time. But when her role ended, that funding source wasn't, it wasn't there anymore. And so our second farm budsman was a farmer who was working in the ag department, and she ran our grants program. And she was able to get some grant funding, and her role really shifted into increasing the agricultural opportunities in conjunction with our cities. And so she was able to put a lot of funneling into the cities where, the cities are they have the infrastructure to support the ag that's being grown out in the county, and that was her role. And then she left. She actually went to the cannabis industry. And then when I was transferred over, our ag commissioner just thought that he might as well apply the role to me. And really, I feel like I'm serving the same role as I have when I was in the planning department. And that is really just to be there as a liaison. Because when you get a permit, it's not just a planning permit, it's not just a building permit. You're gonna, if you're in an area that's not surrounded by services, where's your water coming from? Where's your where's your wastewater going to go? And so we have all these regulatory agencies, and that's what I feel like my role is the liaison. Because you've got public works, you've got environmental health, you've got the fire districts. If you don't have a water supply that can handle your fire needs, that's going to be an obstacle for you. So there are all these different, what I call kind of our reviewers or our agencies that we have to collaborate with, and that's what the farm budsman role does. But I will say in the past, and this is in conjunction with Penny back there, our farm budsmen were able to, and this is something that you might be interested in, they were able to coordinate field days where interested parties were invited to kind of attend. They do field trips to the different farms in Yolo County. They choose about, 5 or 6, and you just get on a big bus and you go and you learn, like, what are they doing? What is their what's their innovation? And a lot of them were, wineries or big vineyards that had turned their barn into wine tasting and event centers, or, we went to so many that it's kind of hard to, but I suggest that as something, is really taking field trips and saying, what are the possibilities here?
Great. So that concludes me grilling you. I think the audience may have a few questions for you. I'd like to leave as much time as we can for the breakout group, so I'm only going to take a few questions, but yes, go ahead, Penny.
I was so impressed with the work that you did on revising the county ordinances and coming up with new rules in 2012. I know there was revisions after that. Could you talk just a minute about things that were allowed by right in your new ordinances? I know farm stays are one of them. Is that still there?
Yeah, we didn't change. So Penny's talking about our comprehensive zoning code update, which was adopted in 2014 and then subsequently amended a little bit in 2016. So farm stays we allow by right, unless exceed a certain threshold and they become more like a bed and breakfast, or they're going to become more like a standalone event center. Farm dinners, we allow by right. Temporary farm stands, we allow by right. We do require a zoning permit. It's not a use permit. It's just an over-the-counter, or not over-the-counter, but an administrative permit for permanent farm stands. So most of these we see, they will also have a commercial kitchen, and they're able to, provide, not like a restaurant, we have to be careful with the restaurant, but they are able to provide, food for the traveling public, if you will, through the tourism areas. We also do allow some of our horse stables, depending on, which kind of started our agritourism in Yolo County, the horse stables, and now they're more what we call our party barns, but our event centers. Some of our small wineries are allowed by right if they don't involve public tastings. And so we tried to capture uses that wouldn't burden people if you really didn't want a large scale or invite a lot of people. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, how about in the back?
Just a quick question. On the events that have it, do you guys have a noise ordinance in your county?
Do we have a noise ordinance? We do not have a noise ordinance, so our general plan has adopted the health and safety guidelines, and so we do apply conditions for, particularly for our event centers when they're using live music. So we do have kind of a threshold at 10 o'clock. It goes off.
Igor?
I just would like to make a point to a lot of the things you were talking about. I looked with this little hole. Seem really familiar to me, especially the permitting aspect. One of the things that the RCD has been engaged in is we have stock ponds in the hills. And what we basically do is we get a programmatic permit, and the landowner on whose property the stock pond is going to be rehabbed works with us primarily. We deal with all the regulatory folks so that they sort of delegate us the responsibility to see that all those things, permitted requirements, are met. And so that seems to be working reasonably well, and it's really within the vision of the RCD would be to facilitate conservation of natural resources. So I wonder if there's any opportunity to extend this kind of programmatic permit to other uses other than what we've done for stock ponds. Some of these other kind of, maybe a package of permits that a landowner might need to acquire to do something that they want to do to promote their business on their own land.
He's referring to endangered species permits.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, we have a similar RCD that does coordinate.
Yeah.
some of that.
I guess I'm just saying that we would like to offer ourselves as a potential resource to help with this smoothing of the path to the permit.
Thank you, Igor. One last question? Yes, Lisa.
Sorry, you used the term farm stays. What is that?
So a farm stay is and in our code, you have to be a verifiable farm, and we do have the definition of a farm, but you can invite people to stay either in the home, or if you've converted a barn with sleeping quarters. It kind of reminds me of the Dude Ranch back in the day. And they just engage in the farming activities. Meals are included. It's a little bit like a bed and breakfast, except it's on a farm, and you're engaging in the farming activities. And we don't regulate that use. We allow it by right, so long as. So the occupancy, I believe, is up to, yeah. See, she's got all that. Yeah. It's 15 occupants with 5 rooms. And so similarly, our bed and breakfast allowance is up to 10. We don't go to the 20 like the state allows for a large bed and breakfast, but that does require a use permit, unlike the farm stay.
So yes, Supervisor.
Definition of farming, you said.
Yeah, we do, and I'd have to read it. Would you like, I mean, I can find it or I can email it to you.
So Stephanie she's super busy. Every time we tried to reach out to her, she was super generous of her time, but she's well up to her eyebrows in a whole bunch of work. So on behalf of the whole group, we really appreciate you making the time. I know you have to hurry back to get to a retirement party that you were willing to miss, and I said we'll try and help you not miss it if we can at all do it. But it's really great when people from one jurisdiction go to another to share their lessons learned, even though it puts a huge dent in your day, causes you all kinds of stress. So on behalf of the whole group, we really appreciate you doing that. We do have a token of thanks. This little story behind this is normally, and I think I saw John Viano walk in, but normally when I need to provide some sort of Contra Costa County wines as a thank you gift, I go, the Viano Winery is right near our office, but I didn't have time yesterday, so we sent Will on a little mission this morning, and he went to the local Safeway. And get. No, I'll just summarize for you, but guess what they don't have? They don't have local wines at the local Safeway, which is a lesson to be learned there. But anyway, Will said this is Will knows a thing or two about wine. He says this is a very good wine. It is not from Contra Costa County, but we hope we will have more for you. But thank you very much on behalf of the whole
Thank
group.
you.